This one is really technical. And this is about membership classes. And this is so nasty. But at the end of the day, the proposal is that there be the voting member be the provincial territorial institutes and organizations, and that there be a class of non-voting members, which are the 7,000 planners across the country. Okay? Right now, the voting members are the 7,000 planners across the country. Okay? The basic options there are kind of keep it the way it is, or do something quite a bit different. There is discussion right now about adding a third class in there, and I wouldn't mind testing the waters here a little bit. The proposal that has gone out to everyone recommends that the board choose the president from amongst itself, rather than the 7,000 planners choose a president that's parachuted in to serve the board. There is discussion about having this, creating a third class of membership where there'd be a limited members, a limited voting right class where the 7,000 could still vote for the president, rather than the board choose the president that they feel is able to best serve them. And there's pros and cons to those. So here's the deal from a governance perspective. I've sat on an awful lot of boards. When the board has the ability to choose the person that serves as the chair of the board, they're able to choose someone who serves that board in that context at that point in time best. Someone who comes parachuted out may or may not actually be good at running a meeting, for example, or even respect the initiatives of the board and what they're doing. And there's pros and cons for both, right? Because if the 7,000 people get to choose who that is, that actually means something to us as voters, right? My observation of our practice here at the Canadian Institute of Planners is it's kind of like a popularity contest. We don't know who the people are, and maybe it's just simply a matter of we need to do an awful lot more to understand who we're voting for and what they're good at and what they're not good at. When we vote for city councillors, for example, by and large, we kind of know an awful lot about them and what they're like when they run for mayor. But it's very much an unknown quantity when we as 7,000 people are voting for president. So that's the reason why to have the board choose amongst themselves. But there are also other really good reasons for the 7,000 people to also say, you know, I'm an individual planner out here and I want to have a say in who the president is. And it's not enough that I can vote for who APPI sends, but I would also like to say who the president is. So what are your folks' reaction to that? Christopher?
I just think we're so far removed from the national process. It's kind of hard for us to actually inform ourselves on, you know, someone who has a resume from Atlantic Canada who's running for president. Like, all we see is their resume, but you know, I feel as you move up in terms of, I guess, volunteering with your respective institutes, you get more linked in with other people. So I see value in having the APPI board send someone and having that board elect their president directly, instead of the people who are just so far removed from that process trying to inform themselves so quickly to make a decision which may or may not be the right one.
Sure. Adam, I just want to check if anyone else wants to comment, and then I'll come back. Andy, and then Victoria, and then I'll come over to Adam.
Given that the proposal is both an association of associations, what's the point of membership of individual professionals in this association? I just don't see the point.
Okay. Victoria, you were chuckling there.
The point is dues.
My point is that there's an infrastructure associated with tracking membership at the national level. If all of the action is at the provincial level, forget the national and have it, as you described, fulfill the creation of identifying and addressing national issues and creating opportunities for provincial members to come together once a year in a conference, separately from pretending that it's got members as individual professionals.
Okay. Adam?
Yeah, I'm concerned that if you only have people, electing each other, same people over and over, what are you going to do to ensure that it doesn't just become an organization where people are patting each other on the back and it limits new ideas from coming into the board?
Okay. A quick response to that is, and I'm going to address this very shortly, is who the institutes send in is absolutely important. I am of the opinion that if the institutes have to look very carefully at who they send, it's going to change who we send. If all of the institutes are paying much more careful attention to who they send to represent them, that regardless of where the president comes from, that's going to change how that board shows up and how it behaves, because it's an important job. If the institutes are the owners, if you will, and I'm using that like with quotations every single time, okay? But if the institutes are the owners, they have to choose very carefully who they send in to run that organization. The issue, Adam, about the patting on the back and groupthink, that structurally, there's nothing to do structurally, in my opinion, to remove that possibility. What it always falls down to, in my opinion, is the quality of person that's there, their willingness to speak what needs to be said, whether or not other people are going to like it or not, and also the willingness to put the differences aside and actually dig in and arm wrestle with the differences of opinion from an impersonal perspective to figure out what is the best thing for that organization to do. I'm going to let other folks have a chance. Thanks, Adam. Greg?
It's not quite to do with the slide, but I think what the topic we're on right now is probably really getting at the heart of the proposed change. And I think planning is moving along a spectrum where many other professions are ahead of us. Take psychologists, for example. This is a model where colleges of the provinces and the territories regulate members. There is a Canadian Psychology Association which provides a national conference, a journal. They provide member services like group benefits, professional liability on a group basis, and of course that can be much more economical to the members who belong if there's a larger pool, and so on and so on. And I think, to talk to Andy's point, I think what it is it's an organization that needs to demonstrate value to belong to. And I think the onus is going to be on this new board to demonstrate its value. Yeah. Because really the regulation of the profession and the operation of the profession in Canada is at the provincial and territorial level. These national bodies have found ways of justifying their existence if they're valuable. And they are sustaining them, people belong if they're valuable. And I think that's the mandate.
What are your thoughts on where the president comes from?
I would suggest that the president would be select, because it needs to operate as a board of directors. Often a board of directors appoints its own president. That's not uncommon. I think we need to separate where we've been from where we're going. And this is a brand new organization you're speaking of. Yeah. That will have none of the powers that CIP had in the past, because CIP had no right to have those powers. It had no jurisdiction to have them. So it needs to reinvent itself and provide value to the members. I'm suggesting it can do that, and a board of directors is probably the way to do it.
Okay. So for me, even right now, when I leave APPI and I fly to Ottawa this last weekend, and the Canadian Psychological Association was in the same hotel having a meeting, just as a quick aside. So when I take that flight and I'm in a CIP board meeting, I am no longer there representing the interests of APPI. This is a learning that CIP board is going through right now. None of us who show up are actually there to represent any special interest. As a board, you're focused on policy. If you want to make sure we have better relationships with students, for example, because this is one of the things CIP's been grappling with, then we've set up an entire working committee to go and be a liaison with students. That's where the work is with students. It's the board's job to say we need to have a relationship with students, and it needs to be improved, and it needs to look like X, Y, and Z. Now, executive director, go and make it happen. right? So it's a basic governance thing. So when I show up there, I'm not representing my interest. The fellow rep isn't. The student rep isn't. The OPPI rep isn't. It's not always how we behave, but that's a whole other thing. But honestly, this whole endeavor is our profession learning about itself, and we're all in a very collegial way learning how to be what we're next supposed to be, and it's not easy. This one is really straightforward. Let me tell you a little story about how when I showed up at CIP Council. We have our AGM in April, so I show up in April. The Manitoba gal shows up in July, the day before the CIP's AGM. The PIBC rep shows up the day after the AGM, and the OPPI rep came in October. So this is a recipe for mass confusion on a board when you have people showing up at 4 different times of year in a given year. So the proposal is nice and simple. We all show up at the same time. We're going to have a board of approximately 9 people, so the 7 reps from the institutes plus 2 members at large. So we'll have roughly 9. The principle is every year a 3rd slide out and there's refreshment, and then the next year a 3rd slide out and there's a refreshment. So Eleanor, who will be next, and down the road APPI will have somebody there for 3 years, and every 3 years we'll have someone in. Anybody have any objections to that part of the proposal? That will be in our bylaws. The implication for us as APPI, if I switch hats here, we're going to have to figure out how to do it, but we've got some time to do that. So I am the treasurer, in fact, on CIP board right now, and the proposal right now is to maintain the funding model for stability. And then once we've undergone this transition, we can look to see what else needs to be done. We are actively going through the process of naming what is the value that CIP offers and aligning that articles of continuance and the purpose to our actual budget. So if you come to the AGM at the Saskatoon conference on June 29th, you will see your treasurer paint a different story about the value of CIP and where our resources are going as it relates to this new purpose of CIP that's about planning as opposed to the planners, which is what APPI looks after. Right? The institutes look after the planners, CIP looks after planning. Here's the basic answer is CIP board determines the fees. The APPI, for example, will collect and remit, and then the fees are the same. That's the proposal for now.
And when the board determines how to allocate resources, it is on what basis? 100% of those voting, or a majority, or 2/3? Like, and how I question to that is, what if one of the associations is deeply unhappy with what the board nationally is doing and decides to not renege?
That can happen now.
The money goes through the
So here's what, under the Organization of Organizations, it's actually clear how that discussion could take place. So from a governance perspective, when I show up, I'm no longer representing APPI, I am representing CIP. That's right. So under this new regime, if you will, if Eleanor as president has a problem with what's happening, she goes to the AGM, and also at the AGM are the other presidents. They have to duke it out at the AGM and provide direction to the board. Okay? At the board, you know, if I'm not representing APPI, but you know, it happens, sometimes there's a motion and I don't vote for it, well, that decision is made and I respect it, right? When I leave the room, I have to stand with CIP Council and the decisions that they've made because I am there to serve CIP. I am not there to serve APPI. So Eleanor, or our president, would be the person who represents the interests of APPI specifically. Okay, Brian and Brian. Croft first.
On money, dear to my heart. As I understand it, Canadian Institute of Planning Board of Directors will determine how much it's going to charge each of its 7 members, not the 7,000 non-voting members. So, for example, they may charge $200,000 to APPI for some reason. APPI as one fee then that they charge, and they collect that fee by adding it on to my professional membership fee with APPI. Is that correct?
My expectation, at least for the short term, Brian, is what happens right now would continue to happen. Because we're...
2 items on your bill.
Yeah, I mean, make it perfectly clear, right? I mean, that's the Albertan in me.
The second part of that question is, I don't have a choice of being a non-voting member on CIP.
So if you are a member of APPI, you are automatically a member of CIP in this model.
Now, that is a change.
No. No. You could choose to not be an RPP in Alberta and not be a member of CIP, and then you could choose, what will happen at CIP is you could be a friend of planning and get the newsletter and stuff, but it does not come with any professional status at all, because that comes through APPI.
Exactly, which means that non-professional, non-voting membership should be optional, but that's an argument that we can.
Okay. Yeah, and at the end of the day, what this model is really making sure that the 7,000 people out there understand that your way into the profession is through the local institute. Your way into the profession is not through CIP. Your way into the profession is through wherever you're working, the API, APPI, OPPI, whatever. That's what we're wanting to reinforce. Okay. Any questions on the funding thing anymore? Oh, Brian, sorry. Brian Q this time.
Well, it's not purely funding, because as you said before, these issues tend to link together. But the distinctions that you're making, I would suggest it'd be more correct to say that the board members should not be acting as representatives of a particular association or interest, but rather for the interest of the CIP as a whole. Now, it's virtually certain, of course, that that will not, in practice, be wholly achieved.
Certainly not always.
And I can certainly see that there could be some issues regarding the perceived value of CIP versus the financial exactions imposed by the CIP board. Is there, and with the 3-year term in that, is there going to be any provision sort of for having a board member recall by an association, a provincial association?
That would be up for APPI to discuss, and I know Eleanor is noting that. Mac is also here from APPI Council. So we as APPI will choose who we send. We will have in our bylaws, we'll need to have a mechanism to choose who we send, whether it's by appointment or an election. There's all kinds of options there. I think that's another piece of the puzzle that APPI will note. Thank you for that, Brian. Andy?
Again, if it's an association of association, there's no point on an annual bill to an association member to separately articulate what the association chose to send to the national level. So I don't see that as an issue.
Okay.
You don't need to, well, you budget it in accordance with the relationship, but you don't need to separately articulate.
Okay.
Beth, just to speak to Brian's point.
Okay.
I'll use the psychologist for an example. It is not mandatory by law to the national organization. Most do because of the value they receive back from it.
Yeah.
And it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. When we were wrestling with all of the different options, one of the options was just simply make CIP something that planners or even anyone could just simply subscribe to. We chose not to go with that option at this point in time because of the financial instability that it brings with it, right? And we felt that it was important that there be some stability. So for now, maybe over time what we spend at CIP will radically decrease or it'll radically increase, but it's always going to have to be connected to its value, and that principle doesn't get removed either way. But there's only so much change we know we can swallow, let alone ask others to swallow.
And those transitions have occurred over time as well in other professions. It wasn't just
Perfect.
change overnight.
Yeah. Our public member, Linda, on APPI Council, she always reminds us, because this feels really awful to be in the middle of, and she always reminds us that you're not unique to this. This is happening in organizations across the country, and the tension between, you know, the provincial and territorial institutes and the federal is, like, it's just everywhere, in everything. So we can't avoid it, and it's a naturally occurring angst. So the only other things I was going to touch base on here was the articles of continuance. What do you think now? I mean, you approved it, but what do you think? And then the other thing was the name to be the Canadian Institute of Planning. What do you think about that now?